For those of the OSBA members who may not know Jonathan Hollingsworth or don't know some of the intimate details, why don't you give us a little bit of your personal and professional background?
Okay, gladly. I was raised in that great metropolis called Lima, Ohio. Graduated from a public high school, Lima Senior. I had the good fortune of attending Harvard University, where I received my undergraduate degree in American Intellectual History. Then I decided to come back to the Midwest. Got an opportunity to go to what I consider to be one of the finest law schools in the country, the University of Michigan, where I graduated in 1983. I started my practice in Dayton with the law firm of Porter, Wright, Morris & Arthur, where I stayed for 18 years. And after 18 years, I decided, well, maybe big firm practice was good for a while, but maybe I'll try the small and solo firm side of things. And that's what I've been doing since 2001. I now have my own office where I'm the principal in the firm. There are 2 lawyers in the firm. And so I've spent the last 12 years or so in a 2 or 3 person law firm, and I've enjoyed it.
What type of legal practice?
Well, some people think that just because you're a small and solo firm practitioner that you have to do general practice. Well, I decided a long time ago that domestic relations was out, juvenile works out, criminal works out. I do commercial litigation. I have always had the good fortune of having business clients that have allowed me an opportunity to help them develop their businesses and grow with them. I also do some employment litigation. I do insurance defense work as it relates to business litigation and employment matters, and some other miscellaneous but related things. But I'm not a specialist, but I try to limit what I do.
You mentioned your undergraduate degree from Harvard, and in the small world that we really do live in, one of your classmates just happens to be immediate past president of the Ohio State Bar Association, Judge Patrick Fisher. Yeah,
that's an interesting thing. I used to say to my roommates, my college roommates, that the world's getting smaller because we fanned out when we graduated in 1980 to all parts of the United States. One of them went to California, another went to D.C., and eventually bought a coffee bean farm and was living in an island in the Atlantic somewhere. And one of them was in New York City and the other was in Boston. And when we get together once a year, we sort of talk about who we meet around the country that were folks that we knew when we were in school. I didn't know Pat personally, but when we arrived here at the State Bar, the Board of Governors in 2008, 2009, I saw Pat and I read his bio, and then I realized that guy did look familiar. And so I went back home and I pulled out my 1976 Harvard freshman yearbook. And there he was. I was Pat Fisher in the flesh. So it is a small world. We didn't live in the same upper class dorm. We did have occasion to run into one another because Pat's a sports aficionado. And when he was in college, Pat was an announcer for the university's radio station, and I played football. So I think on occasion, Pat may have had an opportunity to announce a game or two, and I thought I'd bring, these are pictures of me, not Pat,
okay, all
because I thought I'd bring just a couple of pictures because Pat probably was announcing the game while they took this rather candid shot of me running the football.
What position did you play?
I was a running back.
Oh, okay.
And he probably was announcing the game when I was scoring what probably was one of my few touchdowns I scored in college. Had a great time. I enjoyed my time at Harvard and my life as an athlete, but I knew that my life was elsewhere, and it was in the law, and that's where I ultimately ended up.
What sparked your interest and your love of the law?
Well, back when I was a child, I used to think about how I would make my life different from what it was. I was the grandson of sharecroppers. My mother had an 8th grade education, and we lived in Arkansas, and I knew deep in my heart that somehow that wasn't the place where I wanted to be. And she had the good fortune to relocate us to Ohio. And when I got to Ohio, I started thinking about the things that were important in life and how I would be able to change my circumstances. And so one day, when you're a kid, you see all kinds of TV shows, and Perry Mason was a big one. And so, oh, that guy, he looks like he's doing good for people. And I said, well, that'd be good too. You can do good things for people, you can make a good living, and enjoy the life that you have. And so at the age of 10, I knew that I wanted to be a lawyer. It was simply a matter of whether or not I'd be able to get there.
When you talk about your family, the circumstances that as you were growing up, is there anyone in particular that inspired you to move forward and pursue that dream of being a lawyer?
That's a good question. There are a lot of people who you could point to as maybe being the center of your life, but I like to think that God is the center of my life, and the person who put me in a position where I was able to get to this point where I am now. Without the guide and the love of God, I don't think that my mother, with an 8th grade education, would have had the capacity to say, hey, this is better for us in Ohio as opposed to Arkansas. So having moved us to Ohio, then I'm in a public school system, and today people criticize public education very much so. I got through a public system. I had the good fortune in elementary school of having Ms. Collins as my 1st grade teacher, Mrs. Williams as my 2nd grade teacher, Mrs. Tafflinger as my 3rd grade teacher, Mr. Hoodie as my 4th grade teacher, Mr. Edgington as my 5th grade teacher, and Mr. Sainert as my 6th grade teacher. All of those people taught me things about the value of education. I remember Mrs. Williams in particular. I used to think that, okay, going to school is all right. Okay, we're going to get an education. Well, it just so happened that I like to go to school. And so I ended up having perfect attendance for the year. And she honored that perfect attendance by giving me a Florida orange. That thing was huge, at least to me, as a 2nd grader. Mrs. Tafflinger, this woman was a chain-smoking, hard-nosed individual, but who understood the value of education and wouldn't let you sit there and not engage yourself in that process. Mr. Hoodie was an incredible teacher, a person who was very personable, who took the time to allow himself to engage with me and a few others who he knew come from a relatively modest existence. And he would do things with us outside of the school. For example, he bought us what used to be a big deal in the 70s, these little wooden airplanes with these rubber band propellers.
Oh,
and
yeah.
We'd go out on the playground at the end of the day and we'd play with these things. But he had a unique educational program. Every 2 weeks, that Friday, would be test day. And throughout the course of the day, we'd spend an hour in 6 different subject matters, and you'd have to take a test either during the course of that hour or at the end of the hour. And he liked me a lot, and one day I got in trouble with another classmate, so he took me out in the hallway. He says, and he took his paddle out, but back then, they could use corporal punishment. Today, you wouldn't dare think of something like that. And he said to me, he said, now, look, I know you wouldn't do this but for having been provoked. He said, so I'm going to spank you, and you need to make sure that you make a loud noise. He really didn't spank me. He hit the chair. So it was a plan so that we could have everybody in the room think that I was being punished for something that he and I both knew wasn't my fault. That guy inspired me. Mr. Edgington, tall, distinguished fellow. We used to have spelling bees in his class every week. And it was always good to be the last person standing because, you wanted to earn his respect. So he taught you the concept of not only wanting to do it right, but also once you get there, you can honor the success of people. And Mr. Sainert was just sort of a cool kind of guy who was a great educator too. So God gave my mother the capacity to move us from Arkansas to Ohio. He gave me the opportunity to meet some very fine educators early on in my life who taught me the value of education. And then I realized that with education, I could change the life that I had. So when we talk about people who have impacted my life, yes, my mother has been an incredible influence, but I have to rank God above her just a little bit.
Is your mom still with us?
Yes,
Yeah.
she is. She lives in Lima, and I see her not as much as I used to, maybe once every couple months, but we talk maybe once every couple weeks. I try to check in on her. I've got plenty of cousins in Lima, and so I trust them to keep an eye on her when I'm not around. And occasionally I'll call one of them and ask what's going on just to make sure I'm not missing anything.
Are you an only child?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
And
the cousins are watching over
yes,
mom on a
and
daily basis.
I grew up with about 15 cousins in Lima, and I had lots more cousins in Arkansas, but 15 in Lima, and they were like brothers and sisters to me. So the idea that my mother was someone that they saw as a second mother, and they'd check on her and make sure that life was good, and if anything happened, then I'd be the first one they'd call. So
With all of those wonderful role models that you've had as you were growing up, and your legal professional background and your leadership that you've already accomplished so far in your career, how does that set you up then for leadership in the Ohio State Bar Association?
I believe that I have developed a basic philosophy of being firm, direct, but fair. I believe in encouraging people to develop independence. I believe in providing people with the tools in which to perform the work that they must perform. But I also believe in a concept that I think is universal, and that is that you have to be prepared, you have to be present, and you have to be engaged. If you have those three basic qualities when you go to work, if you're present, you're engaged, and you're prepared, and you appreciate the fact that you have the capacity to exercise independent judgment, then you'll succeed. And those are the principles by which I choose to follow in terms of my leadership, whether it's been in a civic and charitable environment or in a professional environment, because it works.
At your acceptance speech at the recent Ohio State Bar Association annual convention in Cleveland, you outlined 4 priorities that you have set for yourself in the coming year as president. And just to briefly go over them, you mentioned the Ohio State Bar Association staff, the potential for the new executive director as Denny Ramey retires. Mm-hmm. You also outlined non-dues revenue opportunities, yes. And then also you mentioned young lawyers and students. Why those 4 priorities before we get into the details of them?
As I said at the time of the speech, I could have a long list, but I know that the work of the bar is one in which there's always going to be something there that the legal profession will have to deal with respect to the system of justice. And so you have to be prepared for the unexpected. So I chose to limit what my focus would be, primarily because of 2 things. First off, I knew that we were going through a transition here at the State Bar, looking for an executive director. And replacing someone who's been in this position for such a long time is not an easy thing. But the idea of first off, searching for, finding, and transitioning that person into this job, I knew it was going to be a tough one, and it has been a difficult one. But the idea of having a new executive director presents both challenges and opportunities. And isn't it a great problem to have, to be working with people at an organization like this where you know you're going to find someone, him or her, who's going to see this as a lifelong opportunity. So that's the reason for focusing on helping the new executive director become acclimated to the family, because I know this person will find this to be a great job. The focus on the staff centers around the idea that this organization has an excellent reputation, both within the state and around the country. It wouldn't be that way but for the folks that have been brought together here to do the many and various things that they do in order to meet the needs of the members. The work of the bar is hard. Apathy, failure, or refusal to become involved is easy. You need good people. You need them dedicated and focused on the work in front of them if you're going to succeed, and we've been very successful. I believe in a principle that I'm sure you've heard before: if you plant hard work, you'll reap success. And that's what's happened here. So I want to focus on the staff in terms of continuing to reap the success that we have accomplished up to now. I see no reason to change what we have here. We can only get better. And with respect to the non-dues revenue issue, the State Bar has a history of being an entrepreneurial bar association, but we're also a voluntary bar, which means that we have to work at getting folks to be interested in being a part of this organization. We can't require you to do so as a means of having a license to practice law. We have historically been able to identify opportunities that have generated non-dues revenue for the organization that has allowed us to underwrite programs and other member benefits at less cost per member than we otherwise would. If we didn't have non-dues revenue, we'd have to raise it by charging our members dues. I like the idea of being able to provide quality value-added programming at less than our market cost, because we have the ability to do so by the non-dues revenue we create. I want to continue to search for opportunities that will allow us to continue to do that. Now, as for the young lawyers, I happen to be a baby boomer. There are 60 million of us.
I'm one of them. Yep.
Welcome to the family.
Yeah.
The millennials, the young lawyers, there are 80 million of them. The baby boomers are the past and the present. The future is for the youth. So we need to train the new lawyers to prepare them to accept leadership roles when those opportunities present themselves. They in turn contribute because they've grown up in an era of technology where everything is almost instantaneous. They have all kinds of electronic gadgets that they can use to make their work life easier and the delivery of legal services easier. They can help us, the older, mature lawyers, the baby boomers, understand and appreciate the value of that technology. I told a friend just yesterday, the era of the Pony Express, the secretarial pool, and the carbon paper is over. We now have to engage in the technology that is rapidly advancing daily. Social media. There are plenty of ways in which to communicate that we didn't, as baby boomers, didn't have to concern ourselves with. Well, now we do. And the young lawyers are the ones who will help us older lawyers understand and appreciate how to use the technology to make us better providers of legal services.
How do you go about interesting them and getting them involved?
Well, one thing for sure that we're doing, Pat has done this, Carol Marks, the immediate past president, did it, and several others. When we started the Leadership Academy, really 4 years ago, the idea was to reach out to lawyers in the 5 to 15 year practice range and to put them through a 1-year program with the understanding that immediately upon graduation they would be infused into the leadership process somewhere. And that's what we're doing. That's what I intend to do. I intend to find places for graduates and the class of 2013 so that they become immediately engaged in leadership and they understand and can spread the word to their fellow young lawyers.
One of the things that you stated in your speech at the convention, I wanted to, it's not paraphrase, but I want to read it. If the pace of change in the OSBA is slower than the change in the society and culture in general, we will become irrelevant.
Yeah. The reason for that statement is because everybody seems to be concerned about how an organization survives. You survive only because people find you interesting and relevant. And as a voluntary association, we have to remain interesting and relevant. One of the mottos of the current staff is that we are to be indispensable to our members. Well, you can only be indispensable if you are relevant. And the relevancy piece causes us to have to focus on where are we in terms of the country, where are we culturally, where are we technologically speaking. These are the things that we need to make sure that we're incorporating into the delivery of legal services in the justice system. Otherwise, we will not be relevant, and we will not, therefore, continue to be the great organization that we have become. So focus should be on doing those things that we know are important. Understanding technology and how to use technology, making sure that we have an integrated staff and that our programming is designed to meet all the members of the profession. For example, a few years ago, we established the Advisory Council on Diversity Initiatives, designed to bring into the bar family lawyers who are part of what we call affinity groups, smaller bars, the specialty bars, who in the past may have felt like the State Bar Association was not for them because they didn't see a home for them. I'm here to say that that's no longer the case. Don't know if it was true before, but I can certainly say during my time here at the State Bar that I can safely say that's no longer the case. There is a home for everybody who is a lawyer here in Ohio who wants to be part of this organization. We have big arms and we welcome everyone.
In your experience or your opinion, maybe a mixture of both, what are the benefits for being a member of the Ohio State Bar Association in this era?
Size is key. The more the merrier. We are a large organization, approximately 25,000 members. We have the capacity to mobilize, to convene and facilitate meetings not only of members from all across the state, but folks in law-related professions and programs. We have the ability, the legislators, we have the ability to bring people together in a way in which we can all sit around the table and discuss the issues that matter to the system of justice here in Ohio. That size matters. We have the capacity to advocate. We have an excellent lobbying program here that allows us to speak to the legislative leaders and the folks in the executive branch here at the state about matters of importance to the folks who practice law here and the people who have the need for our services. This past year, we had two good examples of that. Some people may not agree, but I believe there were two very good examples. This Bar Association got involved in issue 2, the redistricting initiative. And the reason we got involved is because we felt that judges were being drawn into a political process, and it was just not appropriate to have them involved in that political process because we wanted judges to continue to be seen as the objective, independent arbiters of disputes between citizens here in Ohio and between citizens outside Ohio who happen to have their matters here in state court. And then this spring, we've had the HB 59, the sales tax issue. We again convened a group of interested parties to address the question of whether or not sales tax on legal services was appropriate. And so the fact of the matter is that things happen in life where you need the ability to bring people together. We have the capacity to do that. Now, put aside all the hard work that we have to do to deal with issues like that. Networking, the opportunity to meet lawyers from around the state, to meet lawyers from outside the state and around the country who come here to present CLEs on our behalf, to interact with our members, to educate them on the law so that we continue to provide first-rate to high-quality legal services. And at the end of the day, after all the hard work is done, the ability to socialize, to just have a good time with people. Let your hair down, so to speak, although I don't have any hair to let down. So that's why I think membership in the state bar is important. There is strength in numbers, and networking is important to building anyone's business and acquiring knowledge and skill to help improve your business, and the opportunity to socialize and meet good people and have a good time.
There's nothing quite like that face-to-face.
Absolutely.
Meeting people in person.
Absolutely. And I know technology is putting us in a position where everything is done electronically and folks can communicate, video conferencing. You can see a person and talk to a person. But, it's like the two of us sitting here right now. It's a lot more interesting and engaging than when I was in a Skype interview with a radio host back in the fall when we were addressing issue 2. I mean, I could see him in the monitor, and I could hear him, and he could see me on the other end and hear me, but it wasn't the same. Mm-hmm. And when you're with people who think like you, who enjoy being in the legal profession, who respect the rule of law, you have a good time.
Is there a particular experience or case that really sticks out in your mind as being memorable or rewarding during your legal career?
After 30 years, that's a tough question. Let me answer it this way. The day I graduated from law school, to me, is the most significant day in my life as it relates to my legal career. Because that was the day when I fulfilled a dream from the time I was 10 years old up until graduation. I became a lawyer. I hadn't passed the bar, but I had a Juris Doctorate degree which said that I was a lawyer. Now, whether or not I practiced was a different story. And then upon passing the bar, I've had the good fortune for the last 30 years to do that which I wanted to do since the age of 10. So when I talk about, when you ask me if there's one thing that stands out, it's all been good. Even the bad is good because you learn from cases that don't go quite the way you want. Because my job is to give my client the best representation possible with the understanding that at the end of the day, I can't make promises, but I can work hard, and most of the time I think harder than my opponent, to get to the right result. And for the most part, I've enjoyed the success of that because clients tell other people about what you've done for them. So the best source of referrals, clients and other lawyers. And if the lawyer who was on the other side respects you and realize that you did a pretty good job on behalf of their client, they tend to tell other people when they have an opportunity to refer matters. And that's what's important.
Is there anything else related to the upcoming 12 months of your presidency or anything, whether that's a message to the members that you would like to talk about today?
Yeah, I said at the convention, and I'll say it again, we are better off working together than we are working individually. I will need the help of the members to help this organization embrace the change that's coming with the new executive director. But I see it as being very positive, very good. We'll obviously be talking about issues that impact the delivery of legal services here in the state. I'll need the members of the profession to be engaged, to give us feedback, to help us do the things that will help make this practice better for them, not only in the coming year, but in the years to come.